fun to read, because even though you think this would be kind of sad, it isn't at all. It's full of this lovely, lively woman who is so tickled to be in the position she's in now, and encouraging you to just finish your journey too. But
Yeah,
she
she has
says,
been. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, she says that you and she planned this. Now, understand, everybody, we all plan our lives. We, with our guides, with the people who will be important. My husband and I planned it together. All of that. We plan every lifetime, and we plan them around specific spiritual lessons. All the stressful, every bad thing that ever happened in your life, you planned that with the people in it and with your guides for your own spiritual growth and the spiritual growth of the other people in your life. That's just the way it goes. But these two had apparently been become so melded over so many lifetimes that they were used to this kind of helping one another to grow spiritually. And this is the lifetime, and I've never heard of this before, but I perfectly believe it. This is the lifetime that they designed to be their last lifetime. And this is how they are celebrating and basically bringing you across the spiritual finish line too, where she obviously already was. She's clearly a person who is very elevated spiritually. So this is new. I mean, it probably doesn't astonish you because you've been living it, but I've never heard of a case quite like yours where people consciously plan, this is going to be our last lifetime and we're going to do it together. And I'm going to help you over the finish line, the last 2 or 3 feet.
Yes, she will. And I'm so glad that you brought this whole subject up, Roberta, about planning our lifetimes, because Lauren and I were very conscious of that. And we'll get into this in a little bit, because I think I should, because when you look at my life in this incarnation, it was all about doing what our book together. Everything led to that. As you said,
Wow.
somewhere in time and what dreams may come. That
Yes.
is about a man searching for his wife, the love of his life in the afterlife. Okay. That's what I came here to do. And the Spiritual Cinema Circle, which we operated for 16 years and sent out 4 movies a month to our subscribers, that was all about spiritual films. It was all about life after life and things like that. The fact that I produced and directed the film version of Conversations with God. I produced and directed a little movie called Indigo. My whole life has been focused on this time.
Yeah.
Because I had to get ready for this. Lauren and I know, and I know there are people out there who have experienced this, who I hope will be smiling and laughing and crying along with me. But when we talked about this, we were very aware that one of us was going to have to be here physically without the other. And we fought about it. We argued.
Who's going to get left behind? You thought about that?
No, we argued about it because we both insisted it be us, because we knew how hard it would be. And fortunately, I won and she relented and let me be the one to stay here. There is no question that this is going to be our last incarnation. There's also another good reason for that, which is that when I do get through the veil, and as you're right, she will be right there. When I do, I plan to spend the first 200, quote, years, unquote, which have a very different meaning on the other side. I said, at least 200 years hugging her.
Yeah.
And then after that, we can figure out what else we're going to do. I wanted to bring up a wonderful thing for your listeners to be able to think of when you're talking about planning your lifetime, because it was explained to me and we wrote about it in the book, but I think it's something that people would get some comfort and some fun out of. So let's say you're between lives and you and your higher self and your angels and your guides and perhaps your soulmate decide what your life is going to be. And the way you do that metaphorically is just to say you go out to a running track in the morning at a local high school. And you're in the afterlife and you go around the track very carefully setting up hurdles for yourself for your next lifetime, things that you need to deal with. And you're very careful that the hurdles are set up far enough apart You believe they're not too high, whatever. You get them all set up and then you're born. And of course you forget all about those hurdles, but you start your life and you start around that track and you spend a lot of your life getting really irritated at the idiot who sent those hurdles up so close and so high, because we forget it was us.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
And that is what we did. And when you talk about the uniqueness of having these past lives and having all these lifetimes together, it is not, from what I understand, it is not ordinary, but it's not rare.
Yeah, I think that's about right. That's a good way to put it.
You know,
exactly.
it is, you know, it's somewhere in between there of this kind of relationship. And do you know who Alison Dubois is?
I know the name.
Okay, so Alison is a really well-known international medium who had a TV series based on her life many years ago. And she is a very close friend. And, you know, it is her life to communicate with people on the other side. When I talked to Alison about this, she said, you know, I'm not going to try to tell you guys anything because you already know. And the only thing she said to me was, don't let anybody try to translate for you what's going on between the two of you, because you both understand it better than anybody else does.
Yep, true.
And it's been very comforting for me in this time. The first 6 weeks were times of utter desperation and grief for me. The grief goes on, as everybody knows, grief. There's been a lot of work done on grief too, Roberta, in the last many years. And people are seeing grief now in a very different way, in a much healthier and a much more realistic way.
I think that's right.
And the best sentence I've heard about that is that grief lasts as long as love does.
Yes, it feels different though. I mean, I've counseled a lot of widows and widowers, and what I tell them in the beginning is, you know, your best day now is about where your worst day will be a year from now, if it's a healthy, because you sort of you adjust in subtle ways. Many people love hearing, you know, the fact that they had, my mother saw my father standing there was a comfort to her. I never, by the way, could convince my own mother that she was going to have a happy afterlife. So she held on till she was 94, but that's another story. The cobbler's kids always go barefoot, but it never does go away, because maybe because it's tied to the love, but the love becomes, as it has for you, it becomes a purer and purer, freer and freer from pain kind of relationship. You know, the raw feeling of losing a limb, which is how it feels usually to lose a spouse, that goes away though. You don't have that now, right? But you do.
Oh, well, I will tell. No, it is definitely different than in January of 2018. It's not nearly as overpowering, and it doesn't happen as often, and it doesn't last as long. But I tell you, it happens when you least expect it. It happens when, for instance, this happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was driving down a street, and I happened to look over toward to the side, and I saw a couple walking together holding hands, which is something that Lauren and I were never anywhere without us holding hands or having her head on my shoulder or something like that. And I saw it and I just burst into tears.
Yeah.
Now, it isn't very early on, as people will see when they read the book. Very early on, Lauren said to me once we started communicating, and honey, probably not a great idea for you to be telling people that you lost me.
That's a good, right. I remember when she said that. Yes.
Because I'm right here.
Yeah, right.
So
exactly,
don't say you lost me, sweetie, because you didn't, and you never will.
Yeah.
So I don't say lost her anymore. When it finally happened, after 6 weeks of doing everything, when she finally found a way to communicate with me, it's something else I want to share with you and your listeners, because I've had a lot of questions about this, which is, how did you know it was her?
Yeah, talk about that.
Well, First of all, I didn't. In the beginning, I didn't. The first time, I had no idea if that was Lauren or not. I hoped it was. She said something very odd to me, which was very easy for me to go do because I was watching a television show that I had recorded. And when I watch series and things like that, I never ever watch previews of coming attractions, and I never watch the credits. And I was about to turn this off, and all of a sudden, I felt Lauren say, honey, don't turn that off. Watch the end credits. And I was like, what? And I thought, okay, well, that's just me talking to me. But I watched the end credits anyway. And one of our favorite songs was playing over the end credits. And it was really about someday we'll walk in the rays of a beautiful sun together.
Yeah, know the song.
It was very encouraging for me. And I knew it was Lauren. Now, how did I know? Did I hear her voice? I absolutely did not. Her voice is a part of her body, and her body was cremated. So there is no way I could hear her voice. That wasn't physically possible.
Right.
But I heard it in my heart. And we talk about this a lot in the book.
Right.
Yep. Be in your heart. Not in your head. Your head is a computer, and it can take you in all kinds of weird places. Your heart speaks a different language. It plays by its own rules, as was said in a movie many years ago. If you listen to your heart, you know, and I knew in my heart that that was her. Now that we have a regular connection, there is always a physical tell. When I know Lauren is around, although she always corrects me about that and says, honey, it's when you know I'm around, but I'm around sometimes you don't know I'm here.
Yes, and that's true of all of our loved ones. Exactly right.
And so there is a physical tell, there's a physical sensation that happens, which I've never discussed and never will. That's private between the two of us. And it is incredibly comforting because the veil is very much thinning. The question, and this is something I wanted to bring up and hope that we can talk about a little, because I can't do an interview with a woman whose podcast is Seeking Reality without talking a little bit about, what reality?
Yeah, go ahead, talk about that.
Because what really is real?
That's the thing.
You know,
exactly right. That's the question.
What is real? Well, I can tell you today, and I'm sure you already know this, that almost all of the work that is being done in quantum physics is the life that human beings experience real, or is it a projection?
Yeah.
Now, that is a huge gulp.
Yeah. Well, but the point is the early physicists knew. I mean, Einstein, who was the quintessential, old-fashioned physicist, pre-quantum mechanics physicist, he said, reality is just an illusion, although it's a very persistent one.
Yeah, one of his great quotes. And Einstein's work in this world was fascinating. So what happens in popular culture when we're going through things like that? Popular culture reflects what we are going through as a humanity. It always does. It's usually behind the curve.
Yes.
But it always reflects it. So what were the Matrix movies about? Now, those movies were,
that's right.
they were gigantic successes.
Right.
Gigantic.
Yeah.
And the Wachowskis, who made those films, who wrote them and directed them, have talked about the fact that they did that to show the audience, you need to really start thinking about what is the real world and what's illusion. Is this illusion and the other side of the veil the real world? But they knew they couldn't do it just that way. They had to do it in a big action movie. And that's what all the action was about. It was just to build that around that central conceit. There are other movies, if people, and at the end of our book, we have a glossary of movies that we recommend to people that kind of reflect these types of things. There's a movie called The 13th Floor that does exactly the same thing that nobody has ever heard of before. It's a very